What's going on, everybody?
You can do other things and you can explore different aspects of yourself and you can become a different person.
You can't use your voice, lift someone else's voice up.
Understand that you are a global citizen and you do have a responsibility.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Life Outside the Box podcast. As always, I am one of the co-hosts, Abby Kernia, and I'm joined by honestly couldn't do without him, my lovely co-host, Asante.
Thank you. I feel the exact same way.
And today on the podcast, we have a very interesting guest, founder of Oh My Curry Goodness podcast. We have Hamza Isalm on the podcast today, and we're going to pick his brain about what it's like starting a podcast, learning about human stories and how to constantly level up and challenge yourself and challenge the way you think and just grow as human beings. And as always, I want to thank Kamiko for sponsoring today's video. So Hamza, I think you may be the first guest that we've had that also has a podcast.
Well, first of all, I'm very happy to be here. And secondly, I feel honored by that. I know podcasting is a work in progress for everybody. So really excited to connect with fellow podcasters, and let's hope that I hope we have a great conversation.
Amazing.
I'm absolutely sure that we will. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. I have a lot of questions, sort of going through my brain about your experience having a podcast. I think it's like such a niche part of the like social media, journalism, media. It's booming right now, and we've kind of like there's radio shows, but podcasts are like inherently different. So I mean, before we get into my giant questions and before we get to pick your brain, why don't you introduce yourself? You know, tell the listeners who you are, what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Hamza Isalm. If you were to ask me when I was little what I wanted to be when I grew up, it would probably be a professional soccer player. Still to this day, I'm a big soccer fan. But when I was 13, I realized that dream was not going to happen. So from 13 to 18, to be honest, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. A part of me thought when I was getting ready to go to college, I was leaning towards the computer science route because my dad is a computer science. Now, I will not lie, I also wanted to do psychology, but I thought that in order to become a psychologist, you have to overcome your fears, and I have a horrible fear of spiders. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to computer science. Now, with my podcasting journey actually started in during COVID. So one of my friends told me about the idea about podcasting because he had interest in it. And so I thought, why not start one? And so from 2018 to 2022, I would start a podcast, end a podcast, start one, quit, start one, quit. And ultimately, the reason why I wanted to do it was because I wanted to know more about people's stories. And at the time when I first started, it was more like, what is it like to be, it was basically with my friends and neighbors that I've met. And it took me a while before I realized I didn't want to do a podcast where I talk to people about their day in calculus or talking about something that may be fun for us, but maybe not fun for everyone listening. So after my last podcast, I decided from April of 2022 to December to work on Oh My Curry Goodness, find guests that is, for lack of a better phrase, worth talking to, in the sense of if we really want to have these conversations about what it's like to be this person, what it's like to be, what are some of your good and bad experiences, I got to find the right people. So entrepreneurs, activists, athletes, the highlight reel is there because you see the title, but let's focus on the journey or the behind the scenes. And so Oh My Curry Goodness has featured a lot of guests. 99.9, if not 100%, is Gen Z, because I think as for the Gen Z generation, I think it's difficult talking about good and, well, I don't know about good experiences, but it can be difficult talking about the challenges and the failures and the things that people don't see because of social media. It's so easy to talk about the highlight reel. So I want to focus on creating that humanistic conversation and focusing on Gen Z because again, we grew up in like with social media. And so let's focus on the fact that let's not just focus on the titles and everything. Let's focus on Gen Z as a human being, because I think older generations are good at being vulnerable and talking about their experiences. So I wanted to challenge myself and say like, okay, let's bring our generation, because even though we are young, we still have good and bad experiences that shape us into who we are today. So that's a little bit about me and my podcast on my curry goodness.
That was like a very incredible elevator pitch. Um, yeah, now I definitely have to dive like really deep into it. I've always been really interested in the things that it sounds like your podcast is about, which is getting to the humanity of people beyond the title, beyond the highlight reel. So I'm really curious, like, why is that a thing that you really wanted to focus on in doing your podcast? Like, what motivated you?
Yeah, so like I said, when I was growing up, I wanted to become a professional soccer player. But one of the things, so my favorite soccer team is the Columbus Crew because I'm from Columbus, Ohio, in the United States. And when I was about 9 or 10 years, no, I think 9 years old, 2011, because I was born in 2002. There we used to have they still do this, but just because of college and everything, I don't get to do it as much, like get to watch the games. But if you're a season ticket, like meaning you get to watch almost all the games, you get a chance to meet some of the players and the staff. And so as a 9 year old getting ready to meet some of his favorite getting ready to meet some of the players from his favorite soccer team, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm about to meet all these people that represent this team. And then when I meet them, it's so easy because like as a 9 year old, I'm thinking athlete, like they're so cool. They must have like a really cool lifestyle. I remember I've said this before, but like whenever I used to ask myself when I was little, like, can athletes go to a grocery store? Which essentially means like, can they be a regular human being or are they stopped by everyone because of their title? And I remember meeting some of the players and I came to realize like they're a human being like me. And it's so weird because again, it goes back to that title and even now, like like I've interviewed soccer players, and it's like you're a soccer player, but when you get to have these conversations, even though it was like for from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, because there are other people that want to meet these soccer players, it was like they're human beings as well. Like they worry about the same things. Yes, they have that title in front of them, like a professional soccer player, but they're still a human being that has had good and bad experiences. And I think by connecting with them on a personal level, it makes you realize that people are not as intimidating as they are. They just are like you, but they just happen to be pursuing their that sport or that passion, whatever that looks like.
I mean, yeah, like it goes to what you were saying before, like getting the humanistic side of people and sort of breaking down the barriers between like title and person and opening the door and making, people's lives more accessible in like a way that like informs and doesn't sort of profit off of. This is all to say that I'm curious about the name of your podcast because a little bit of like insider baseball, like, I mean, Life Outside the Box podcast, we do the same thing, right? Like, Life Outside the Box, we interview like artists and authors and sports psychologists and athletes, and, everyone has a different walk of life, but at the end of the day, there's this string that connects us all. And like, our podcast really tries to find that and, share it with our audience. So, where did the name of Oh My Curry Goodness come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, oh my goodness, I break it down. I break it down into two parts. So, the oh my goodness part stems from the fact that when we hear stories that are interesting or shocking, I think shocking is the right word because when we hear good and bad, I think shocking is the more appropriate term. I could be wrong. But when we hear stories that are shocking, we say, oh my goodness. And then sometimes to, I guess, further emphasize the goodness part, I know a lot of people like to put a word between middle and good, between my and goodness. So like sometimes you get these people that will say, oh my freaking goodness, or oh my insert goodness.
Right.
So I wanted the podcast to be about me. And as someone who really loves curry, because my parents are from Bangladesh, which is in South Asia. Curry is a very popular dish in South Asia, and because I love it too much, I thought, well, I want to include curry. Where do I do it? And then I thought, well, people say, oh my goodness a lot, so why not oh my curry goodness? So it's like a really weird way of emphasizing the goodness part. So it was something that, you can definitely see me in it because I love curry. And then the fact that, again, we see these stories and we go, oh my goodness, I couldn't believe that you did this or you went through this. So yeah, just a combination of my favorite food and then the fact that, we hear these stories. So, oh my curry goodness, after some word, I forget what's the term, like word puzzle, oh my curry goodness just sounded really ridiculous and hilarious at the same time.
That's awesome.
I love that name. Not only because I also love curry. You know, it's interesting. I'm Jamaican, so I mean, it's a different kind of curry, but curry
Yeah.
nonetheless. But my best friend is also Sri Lankan, so anyway, like both sides of the field. But that being said, I'm curious about like, the folks that you have interviewed and sort of like what you've learned. So like, are there any things that in the process of doing your podcast, you're like, oh my God, that was a really, or oh my curry goodness, that was a really, interesting thing that I learned, or something that inspired me, or something that maybe changed how I saw that person or people in that industry. Have there been any lessons like that that have, come up for you as you're doing the podcast?
It's really interesting because I interview a lot of, like, I don't look at just one specific group of people. Like, I don't just look at athletes. I do look at entrepreneurs and activists from everywhere. And I think the broad answer, to answer this question, I feel like it has to be in broad terms, which is in the sense that it's the fact that everyone came with, like, it wasn't like all figured out. It wasn't all figured out. Like, I've had people on the podcast talk about how they didn't do well in school, like they didn't have the best grades possible, and yet they're doing really good things. I had a I interviewed someone, I may have been in the same, he well, we didn't, I think he may have been, well, we didn't grow up in the same city, but like somewhere close, or somewhere like in the area, if you will, where he talked about how he once majored in computer science and then he switched to digital entrepreneurship, and now he's his own company where he helps black-owned businesses get the recognition they get on social media platforms. And so I guess from a broad sense is the fact that not everyone has it all figured out. And I think why that's such a not a relaxing message, a comforting message, or like a sense of a sigh of relief, like, whoo, that makes sense. I think why that's so good that's so important is because, like, for a lot of people, it feels, I mean, for me, I feel like this way as well, where it's like, oh, I feel like I have to figure everything out, like everything has to be right. But I've learned that throughout people's journeys that there's so many challenges that they have gone through that it's not as easy as it sounds. And a lot of the people that I've interviewed have obviously done really incredible things, but that's the destination part. The journey was filled with beauty and ugly moments. And so I think when you have when you have the chance to interview people, I know it's one thing to read about it. I think it's another thing to hear from another person. But when you actually have those one-on-one, at least virtual conversations, or if it is in person, you realize that yes, what they're doing, they're obviously really passionate about what they do, and they look like they love what they're doing. They're doing really good things. That there was a journey that had good ups and downs. So as someone who has done podcasting, like, I feel like I have to figure everything out. Like, okay, I got to get this many views. I got to reach out to this group of people. But for them, it's like, wait, based on their story, it's okay for me to have good and bad moments. I don't have to make it perfect or have to have everything figured out, because it's I'm reaching out to people about their journeys, but in a really interesting way, I'm also having my journey of ups and downs. And so I think, to, I guess, answer the question is to learn about the fact that everyone has a journey and not everyone had it all figured out.
That's a great point you make. I mean, as you were talking, got me thinking, like, we started this podcast, like, how many, like, it's been, I don't even remember the year that we started
It's been a
this, but
minute. It's been like, I mean, I watched you grow up.
I mean, yeah, I was on the phone with
Yeah.
Jillian earlier today, and I was like, I started the magazine in the 11th grade, and I'm in my final year of my bachelor's degree. So it's, we've gone on this incredible journey, like working at the magazine, and the podcast has been a great, like, part of my journey, and learning those people skills, and like you said, Hamza, like, our journey as podcasters, like, go with the guests that we have. And having this podcast, just, it's helped my school, it's helped, like, my social skills and my confidence. So I'm curious, like, sort of breaking down the walls a little bit and going back in the past. You said you've had a couple of podcasts you've started, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
how was that journey? Like, what made you start, like, the first one, and what have you learned since, like you said, starting and stopping, and then coming to, oh my curry goodness, now? How has that journey been?
Yeah, it's been a weird journey. So when I first started, I had no idea what podcasting was. Essentially, I have my phone here, but basically, I remember my first episodes, it would be hitting the record button and just being like, okay, guys, today my name is Hamza Islam. This week I'm speaking to so and so, and it felt like less of a podcast and more like a phone call.
Right.
And it took me a while before I realized you can do Zoom interviews. Like you don't have to just be on the phone. It just looks so weird. But yeah, I remember starting that and I was like, okay, clearly this is not the way I wanted to, but I still like the idea of learning about people's stories. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned from the first time I started to doing Oh My Curry Goodness is one, having insightful conversations, but also, and I guess this goes into the overthinking part, but definitely trying to do as much research as you can. Now, it's really hard to do that with friends and neighbors, but there have been times where I've been able to interview people of influence, if you will. Not like
Right.
anyone famous, but like again, like I've had a soccer player, I've had local politicians in the area. I think the importance of doing your research because I think guests don't like to be asked the same questions over and over again. So it's like, okay, I gotta make sure that when I'm having a guest that I am the best interviewer possible. And if I don't know much about them, can I still treat them as if I've done my research on them? So I think the biggest thing I've learned from podcasting is, of course, I mean, having the right equipment, making sure that you look good as an interviewer, but like in terms of like what you're wearing and how you look, but most importantly, doing your research because guests, when they join a podcast, they don't really know what to expect. Like, sure, they may listen to your podcast, but when you're a guest on a podcast, we're probably gonna be wondering, what is this experience like? And when a guest knows that they're being challenged in a good way, like, oh wow, these are conversations I've never had before, then it really makes them feel like, wow, I could really talk to them because they've done the research and I don't have to start from level one. I can start at level five, if you will. I know that was a weird reference, but yeah,
All good. I get it. I play video games. Um, but anyway, yeah, in keeping on the same train of thought about your journey as a podcaster, it sounds like you've been doing this for a minute. So what, I guess, or let me back up a minute. How has podcasting impacted Hamza, the person? You know, Abby was just talking about, her growth as a person, and I could say many of the same things. My growth as a person doing the podcast. So what about you, Hamza? How has Hamza changed, or how has your life changed as a result of being in podcasting?
for sure. And I think I'll answer this question in two different ways. So the first one is the fact that because I get to interview people and understand their personal story, it's allowed me to, I guess, shut up, if you will. And I say shut up because it's so easy to think that, like, when you're talking to other people, that I guess to make it easier, it's like when you want to hang out with someone and they say no. I think for a long time I used to personalize it. Like if a person says no, it means they're probably holding some sort of, it's probably like they don't like me, or it's now me versus them. Like there's a personal attack. But when you get to interact with people, you realize actually there is a story or there's a reason why they can't do it. Maybe there's something that because you don't spend time with that person and because you don't see you don't understand what they're going through. I think the best thing to do is to just understand that there's something going on that you don't have any control over, or nor do you really understand. So let that person focus on themselves or work out whatever issue they have. And when you have the chance, you can connect again. I think before the podcast, I used to personalize no's, if you will, but now it's like maybe there's something going on and I don't have the answer to it. And because instead of investigating it, I'm just gonna let them be them. And once they're out of that situation, we can finally meet. So I guess that's what I mean by shutting up, which is the fact that I don't know what they're going through, but I want to give them that moment. And I think that's what podcasting has done because you're listening to people and they're talking about their difficult experiences and you're like, okay, so this is like what actually happened, and knowing that you got to be really patient because these are personal experiences. I kind of went on a tangent, so I hope that made sense. But I think the other part is from a professional standpoint, I think hanging out with friends can still be scary. So if someone said, "Hey, I want you to hang out with this person just for fun," I think I stress out too much because I want that person to like me. But if it's more like, "Hamza, I need you to go to this person," and like I used to do door-to-door painting growing up, and so it's like, "Hamza, I need you to go to this house. I need you to go to this house and see if you can talk to people and getting them to buy in on this painting idea." I think because of the fact that I've worked with PR managers and assistants and guests, because if I want to have them on the podcast, I have to go through them, like that original challenge. And so because I'm used to it, I'm not afraid to like meet with people. But as long as there's like a purpose, like if it's a I have to do something, I'll do it. If it's a I want to do it, like, hey, go hang out with this person, get ready because my heart rate's gonna go up super high just because I want to have that great conversation. So yeah, talking to friends can be scary, but as long as there's like a purpose or like a professional, like, hey, I need you to do this because of this, I think because of the fact that I've worked with people on the podcast, it's helped me become better at getting people to buy in and not being scared of interacting with strangers.
I mean, speaking of like giving people their moment, has there been like a guest on your podcast that's shared their story and their life experiences with you that's just like impacted you like in a crazy way? Have you had that sort of like deep connection?
Yeah, I
Putting you on the spot a little bit.
no, I mean, so one of the guys I talked about how his name is Siraj Wood. So I sort of mentioned him earlier where he was a computer science major and then he switched to digital entrepreneurship. And why I found his story to be really interesting was that there was a time where he was afraid to speak up in front of class. He was shy, and now he's going on and saying, or he's going to people and inspiring people to pursue the entrepreneurial route. But one of the most interesting things he said was that because I asked him what was like the first step he took to find his purpose, and he said he had to look at himself in the mirror, and he said that I'm the reason why I'm not getting the things I want. It's very easy to look at other people or to look at other things and say, "Hey, I can't do this because of this," or "I can't do these things because of this person." But at the end of the day, I am my biggest enemy, and I am the reason why I'm holding myself back. And I think that was really interesting because I used to play that game all the time where I'm like, okay, I can't do this because of this. It's not my fault. And while that may be true for a lot of cases or for a lot of times, there are moments where you have to go, you're the reason why you're not at level two. You're level one because you haven't done anything to get to level two. And as scary as it can be, because if you want to move up, you may experience rejection, failures, and everything, but like that can happen, but also good things can happen. And you want to be as optimistic as possible, but you have to make sure that you give yourself that chance because ultimately you're the reason why you're not getting the things you want. And so when he said that, I realized that I'm gonna have to shut up and work, not just blame other people, but if I don't get the things that I want, I'm gonna look at myself and think about what did I not do or what did I do that made it so that I didn't get what I want. So definitely the sense of like I gotta look at myself in the mirror more often than just looking at other people's mirrors.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That's something that I learned probably a little bit older than you are now. And it was very transformative for me. But as I was sort of learning to do that, and things in my life started to change in a major way, as I like bought a house in my 20s in Toronto, which like was wild. Well, that was before prices really exploded, but but anyway, but like I essentially was like, one like minute I was living like this bachelor apartment that was, not that great. And then 2 years later, I was in this, 3-bedroom house with 3 bathrooms in it and a huge backyard. And, people were like, what happened? Like, how did that happen? And I started to say, well, I had to change my mindset and take a lot more responsibility for, my day-to-day things, my habits, etc. And then a lot of people in my life started to not like me because, um, it almost, I think maybe they took it as maybe an attack or something of that nature. So I guess, the question I have for you is, as you've adapted that mindset and started to action that in your life, how has that changed your relationships?
Yeah, I I mean I would be lying to you if I said that even though that was one of the most important things mentioned on my podcast, that it's still a struggle because I think there is a you want to be I think it's very easy to say I want to develop this mindset where I'm not going to care about what other people think. I know that I mean, obviously, sometimes people think of it as selfish, but it's like, I'm gonna do what I want to do. And it's hard because you are one of many people. And so you don't want to be in a situation where you hurt the wrong people or you upset people or you want to upset your friends or your family. And it's difficult. Like, I definitely don't want to upset my parents. Like, I've had a great relationship with them. And so, like, if I ever, like, I think I don't ever want to say, I'm gonna do what I think is right for me, or I'm gonna have this mindset because I'm worried that if I say the wrong thing, that it might mean the wrong message, or it's gonna send them the wrong message. So it's difficult, and I think what I needed to do is listen to those who, when it comes to like trying to become a better person, I think definitely spending time with people who value that. So like family and I think as long as they see it, then it's good because obviously like you want to be a better person, but let's be honest, if you're at level 1 and you want to get to level 5, I think you might want to hit level 2 first because level 1, level 5 have different difficulties. So definitely connecting with the right friends and family and knowing that not everyone is going to accept you or going to support you, but I mean, I think you and I and everyone else can agree that friends come and go, and whether that's good friends or bad friends, they come and go, and it's unfortunate. That's unfortunately life, and it's unfortunate these things happen. But there's a small group of people that will support you and that want to see you succeed. So hold on to that, and that's something I've had to focus on. Instead of just trying to please everyone, I have to at least work with people that really want to see me succeed and not just in a short-term sense like do this you're good, do this you're not good, but it's I need you to do this, you may not like it, but I promise you it's for their greater good. So definitely looking at those close friendships and family relationships, that's been the most important thing, but it's been a while and it's still something I struggle with just because it feels like when you upset one person you feel like you're the villain all of a sudden.
I'm
Definitely
curious, you've
been
been
there,
mentioning
definitely.
like these like levels, like level 1, level 2, and 5. Can you explain a little bit like what that means and like in your personal rating scale, like how do you know if you're like at a level 3? Like what does that mean?
Yeah, it's really weird. And Asante, I know you talked about playing video games, so you might need to back me up on this. But essentially, I always feel like in order to get to like I always feel like for even when the people I've interviewed, and I'm sure you can agree with this, like there are a lot of
Right.
incredible people that we've had the chance to interact with, but
Hmm.
they haven't reached the finish line. They're still learning about new things and adding value in whatever that looks like. And I think like for example, with my podcast, I say I'm still at level 1, even though I've done it for oh my curry goodness, I've done it for a year and a half. The reason why I haven't got to level 2 is because I've still struggled with promoting. I still don't have a huge fan base compared to, or not a huge, like a big fan base. I don't
Right.
know what it looks like. So I think like that's why I say like when I mean by levels, it's more like okay, level 1, we're here. In order to get to this next stage or next phase of our lives, that's level 2, but what do I need to do to become better? I think one of the things that I've tried to focus on is how to become better 1% every day. And so from like a podcast standpoint, level 2 is more like, I don't know, when we have a slightly bigger fan base, but how can I get there? Oh, I haven't gotten there yet. So it's more like, I don't know, it's more like you're trying to get through level 1, but because you're still trying to deal with these challenges that you're currently facing, and I haven't overcome them. That's why I'm in level 1. And so, but once I overcome them, then I can get to level 2. And then as I continue on dealing with these challenges and obstacles, once I overcome them, I get to level 3. So I guess it's more of like the fact that we are continuously learning and trying to become better, but we can't get to that next level until we get past our current obstacles and journeys. So, like Asante, I know you played video games, so I'm sure there's been levels where you're like, I need to get to this level, but my goodness, I hate this level. So these obstacles and challenges. So it's one of those
Yeah.
things where until you get through the current things that you're dealing with, once you overcome them, or you can't get to that next level just because you're dealing with this thing. I know I just said the same thing over and over again, but hopefully you know what I mean. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, that resonates. What's really interesting about what you're saying is like even using video games as an analogy, right? It's like, the farther you go in the game, the harder it becomes typically, right? And I have found that the same is true when you're sort of moving up your career. Well, video games have this weird like the thing where the beginning is hard because you don't know how to play it yet, and then you kind of get the hang of it, and then it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and then it's kind of easy for a minute, and then it gets hard again because the people who make the game, they give you a challenge, and that's the reason you keep playing it. And life is sort of like that too when you try something new. It's hard at the beginning, you get the hang of it a bit, and you start to experience a little bit of success, and then as you start to climb that ladder, then it gets hard again, and then there's pressure, and there's expectations, and all these things that are happening, right? So I'm curious about like where you are, in your life, and you're a young guy, and you're ambitious, and you're doing all these things. Like what level are you at, and sort of like what's your final level, if you like, at least in the conception of Hamza in 2024, like as you look into the future, where are you now, and like what's your final level as far as you can conceive it right now?
honestly, I don't know what my final level would look like just because, again, it goes back to the fact that everyone is constantly learning and trying to be better. As far as what level I'm at, I don't even know. And it's funny because it definitely depends on like on what lens we're going at. So like there is like the relationship I have with my identity. Like I'm South Asian or I'm Bengali. So remember having this discussion with a guest where I was like, I feel like I'm at level one because I'm trying to learn the language. Like my parents speak Bengali, and I've seen the language, and I'm like, how do you guys learn all this? This is so hard. So I'm like, I want to learn about that. But then there's podcasting sense where it's like I feel like I'm at level one because I don't have a big audience yet, and I haven't done enough to promote myself. So from that lens, it's like level one. I would say in terms of like Hamza Islam, the human being, I'm 22 years old, so I feel like I'm at level 22. But I feel like, embarrassingly enough, even though I'm 22, I still act like a child at times. So does that mean I'm at level 13, level 12? Like I'm 13 or 12? So I guess it depends on the different lens. It's very hard to pinpoint like, okay, with everything going on, I'm at level this just because there's so many different ways or different like parts of me. So yeah, it just depends on what aspect. And again, like the final level, I mean, it's gonna be infinity. Just because, well, I'm not gonna live until infinity. That's not the point. But the point is like there's no, I don't think there's ever a finish line. Just because there's always room to continue to go. And even if you're at a good place, there's still the sense of like there's something more, and I want to keep going and
Yeah.
just continue to do it until I can't do it anymore.
I mean, like right there at the end, you answered my question. I was gonna say like there kind of feels like there's a beauty in not knowing what level you're at because that means you're always trying to get better. And like you said, like 1% better every day. Because I feel like I've met a lot of people in my life, in my career, and school that's just they feel stuck and they feel like they can't move. Like this is just how life is gonna be, this is where they're at, and they just kind of have to settle and accept that. And that's really not true at all. Like you said, like there is no level five really, because you're always growing and you're always, learning new things and trying to be better and, you know, experiencing life in all these different ways and meeting a million different people. Um, what would you say to someone who kind of feels like that, like who feels stuck, who just feels like I'm always going to be at level one and there's nothing else for me?
Yeah, that's it's difficult. And I want to be really clear to anyone listening, I am not a self-help guy. So I just want to like let people know like, okay, I'm gonna take these advice.
Yeah,
One
the
one
metaphor,
thing
yeah.
it's really hard, and I really appreciate the question because it's not like, you're not you kind of feel like you're a video game character, like, but it's the sense like you can't see like, okay, what does my health bar look like? If you do
Right.
ask that, that might be like the weirdest question someone has ever heard. Like, what's your health bar look like?
Yeah.
Um, I would say it's hard. I'd say the best advice I would give people, it's cliche as it sounds, but I still think it's it's worth it is to focus on the small wins as possible, because yeah, there will be a lot of challenges and there's going to be days where it sucks or you're just gonna have a lot of bad days. But I would say, just to focus on finding those small wins as possible, and then because it gives you that confidence. And I think, yeah, it's difficult because I mean, when you're asking this question, I feel like there's a lot of people that may not find that, and there's so many people who are in different parts of the world where it's so hard to find that level of positivity. But I always say try to find the positives in the negatives as much as you can, whether that's from yourself or maybe something that you see, just to give you that that belief that you're capable, or that you're able to overcome that. It's a really difficult question because there are so many parts of the world where there's a lot of negativity. But I would just say, and again, I wish I was a self-help guru, but I'm not. But definitely try to find the small wins as possible so that you can try to develop that positive mindset. And then as you continue to build that weapon, if you will, or that belief, you can then try to challenge yourself and hopefully more good things can come. I know that's a difficult, may not be the best answer, but it's definitely challenging.
Yeah, I think the part of that answer that people might struggle with is actually the reality is sort of that, an analogy I like to use is, when a baby learns to walk, they suck. Like they can't do it, you know, and it takes them a while to just like learn how to like go from sitting up to standing up and then like moving one leg and they like hang on to the side of the table or the couch or something. And then eventually they start walking, but it's not very good. And then, then they start running and next thing you know, they're doing cartwheels, right? But I have a toddler. But anyway, um, uh, you know, uh, what I'm curious about is, I think starting a podcast and putting yourself out there is a very scary thing for a lot of people, myself included. Despite that I'm on this podcast, like it's easier to do it with the team than it is to do it, on my own. Um, so, on your journey, where does confidence come from, and sort of what keeps you going in those times of doubt or uncertainty?
Yeah, I think the confidence part comes from just learning from other podcasters. So, one of my favorite, or even just interviewers in general. So, one of my favorite, well, I don't even know if it's a show, but it's definitely on YouTube. It's called Hot Ones, where the
Oh,
host
Yes.
interviews a celebrity, and while he's asking questions, they're eating wings with different levels of spiciness. And so the thing I like about him is that even though they're like 20 minutes and sometimes fun, they're also good questions. Like you can tell because the guest is like, "Oh wow, I've never thought of it that way," or "Wow, that's a really good question." So learning from someone like him, another comedian, well, he's a comedian, but he used to host the Daily Show. His name is Trevor Noah.
right.
There was a portion of his shows where he would interview celebrities, politicians, athletes, and the way he asked questions are really like thought provoking. Like there's been a couple of guests where it's like, oh wow, you're really good at this. Like he said, like he or she has said that in front of Trevor Noah, and so it's like, okay, I think I know how to frame these questions. So confidence definitely comes from learning from other podcasters. And then I guess where does the willingness to keep going even when times are difficult? I told myself when I started Oh My Curry Goodness that if I quit this podcast, I'm never doing this podcast. Like I'm never doing podcasting again. So I guess it's just the sense of like I don't want to quit because I just don't want to. And so there's this willingness to just continue to keep going because I already told myself that I'm not going to visit this ever again. I have to go not all in, but as much as I can on the podcast. And then also the fact that I love learning about people's stories. And I feel like, listen, I don't think I'll ever have a talk show. I'd love to. Apparently, some people think I have a great podcasting voice, which I don't even know what that means.
This is true.
But,
Yeah, they're right.
but, but at the end of the day, I still want to learn about people's stories. And I think podcasting is probably the best way to do it. Like it's the best way to learn about people's stories. So I'm going to continue to do this because that's one thing that I'm very curious about. And it was something that I've been curious about since I was little. Like, what's it like to be an athlete? What's it like to be an entrepreneur? And the fact that I've been introduced to the idea of podcasting, it's like, well, here's the best way to learn about to be curious about people. So even though I'll have good and bad days, or maybe I'll have a lot of people listening or not a lot of people listening, the why is still consistent, which is, again, I want to learn about people's stories, and that's not going to change regardless of what other people say.
And, speaking of like your goals and, everything you were just saying, we, at the end of each episode, and as we're wrapping up now, we always like to throw in, it's sort of cliche and it's, but it's true, it works and you get good answers every time. So standing where you are now, Hazem, like at Oh My Curry Goodness and, looking back on your journey from starting and stopping podcasts all the time, what is something that you wish now that you could tell your younger self?
Hmm. I would say the one thing I wish I would tell my younger self is ooh, to challenge yourself. I know that's a very broad sense. I think a younger me would have been afraid to try different things just because of the worst possible scenario. I mean, li- podcasting has good and bad moments. You're reaching out to people. The worst thing that can happen is someone says no. Or, I mean, and a lot of the people can be intimidating, especially when you work with PR managers or assistants. But honestly, definitely continue to challenge yourself just because it's going to help you become a better person. It's going to help you become a more confident person. I mean, as a podcaster, it's difficult because you're working with all these people, and the worst thing you can think of is what's the worst. It's going to be a terrible interview. It's going to be this, or it's going to be bad. Or if you're trying to promote your podcast and you're trying to get friends to get involved, you're worried that they may not like you, or that you're worried that they may just stop talking to you because it's like, why are you reaching out to me about podcasting? But honestly, just continue to challenge yourself because it's going to help you become a better person and whatever that may be. And I want to continue doing that even now, just because it's very easy to be complacent. It's easy to be, when I say safe, I mean like in like not like, hey, make sure you're texting and driving. Like, no, that's not safe. That's terrible. But like in terms of trying to become that better person, it's okay to challenge yourself. It's okay to experience like good and bad things because one, there's an interesting story. You can tell people that, hey, I challenged myself. I had good days and I had bad days, but I've become a better person. And so, just not be afraid of failure, not be afraid of, I guess, like thinking about what's the worst possible thing. Just experience it, try it. And regardless if it's a good or bad experience, you have a story to tell, regardless of the magnitude of that story.
Amazing.
Love it.
Well, yeah, I think I think it's a great place to end this episode. I love to leave these episodes on like a little, it's cliche as it might be. It gets people thinking and it certainly gets me thinking. And yeah, I just want to say, Asante, unless you have any other questions, like,
I'm
thank you
good.
so much
Yeah, yeah.
for coming on. It's been so fun to just talk to someone else who has a podcast and sort of pick their brain. And, everything that you were saying, I've 100%, I've gone through it. I'm still going through it, And I love the analogy of being at level one. And no, I know it's not like a self-help sort of guy, but I do like that analogy, and it's definitely got me thinking.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because, I say that I'm at level one when it comes to podcasting. And it's funny
Hmm.
because people like sometimes people say, hey, you ask really good questions. This is like one of the few times I've been a guest. So I
Wow.
definitely feel like I'm level one as a guest. But nevertheless, it was still a great experience and learning
Yeah.
from you two you two people, or learning from you two. I don't know why I said that. Learning from you two. That's one thing you should know about me, as I like to overthink a lot. But yeah, it was great to, chat with you guys, and
Yeah.
the questions you've asked are really good. I'm not a, it's a little philosophical, but I like that. I think it helps you
Yeah.
understand more about a person's viewpoint and their mindset and like how they view things. And the fact is that even though you or Abby, Asante, like we are human beings on a broad level, but we are all different. We all have
Hmm.
had different experiences, and so we should remember that we have something in common, which is that we're human beings with podcasts, but we are also different with different viewpoints and different ways of seeing the world, if we will, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. So I guess that's a wrap. Thank you so much.